Welcome to the Standing For Truth YouTube channel, where we make the Bible come alive. Make sure to follow us for the best evidence refuting evolution and confirming biblical creation.
All right. Welcome to Standing for Truth. My name is Donny Badinsky, and joining me is Matt as we come together to do something special, a 2025 year in review. If there was ever a time to be a Young Earth Creationist, this was it. 2025 was a landmark year, from genetics to geology to live debates and direct challenges to evolution. The evidence just kept stacking up, and it refused to be ignored. Tonight, we're highlighting the biggest moments of the year, answered challenges on mutation rates, Neanderthal genetics, ERVs, hominin fossils, the heat problem, and more, along with the debates, articles, updated books, seminars, and breakthroughs that really defined 2025. So buckle up. This is why it's a great time to be a biblical creationist. And we have the evolution destroyer himself, Matt. Man, what a year, brother. And look at you joining us in California on a beautiful sunny day. Matt, how you doing, brother?
Doing pretty good, man. Doing good. It's actually for here it's cold, which is funny because there's no ice or snow or anything like that here. So you acclimate to the heat pretty quick. Then anything below, I would say 75, you're cold.
Well, yes, here we got this stuff called, it's this white stuff that falls from the sky called snow right now. It's cold. It's stacking up, much like the evidence in 2025 has really stacked up against evolution and for creation. So, Matt, I'm glad that even in light of your last week of storms in California, you really only get a few a year, right? So wrap up the year with a bang. You're still able to join us here. So before we get into the fun, we got a good comment section or a good live chat already. We'll address comments, questions. So for those with challenges, questions, clarifying questions, send those in. Matt and I are here live clearly to address some of those. So I just wanted to remind everybody, we've been doing our Genesis Revealed series, where we defend biblical origins and dismantle pseudoscience like evolution, that kind of evolution that says you as a human, are related to a banana plant. That is not science. I can't believe they print that in a textbook. That should be printed and then thrown into the trash, as we've shown in 2025. So we just finished episode 4 of Genesis Revealed with Dr. Dino, demolishing dating methods. Ton of fun. It just uploaded to Patreon probably just about 20 or so minutes ago. And so, Matt, let's kick this off with a bang. So it's been a busy year. It's been a great year of debates, interviews, presentations. You and I, we give every year quite a few presentations and seminars, but this year we gave more than usual, which we love to do. And we kicked off the year with 2 programs on creation today. We started with a program focused on the scientific evidence for Adam and Eve. And then our second program on creation today focused on demolishing the so-called best evidence for evolution, endogenous retroviruses, which there's a very desperate evolutionist out there who goes by Barry Despero. He thinks he's the showman, the spokesman for ERVs. I recently put out a detailed technical article and then also a video demolishing all of his arguments. His attempted responses were laughable. At some point in 2026, we'll probably get to them. But the invitation is there for Barry to step into what? The debate coliseum, Matt. We entered the debate coliseum several times this year. Okay, so we kicked off the year 2025. Creation today, scientific evidence for Adam and Eve, going into mitochondrial DNA, Y chromosome mutation rates, the fact that we have low diversity and fast mutation rates in both of these DNA compartments, the mitochondrial chromosome, the Y chromosome. These are uniparentally inherited DNA compartments. As you know, you're an expert at this, brother. Low diversity, just a few DNA differences separating people in the maternal chromosome, maternally inherited mitochondrial DNA, and then the paternal, passed on the father's side, the Y chromosome. So we know there's fast mutation rates, only a few DNA differences. What is that? Well, that's biblical time. How long does it take to accumulate those DNA differences? Matt, you recently, we published a study, very comprehensive technical study, demolishing all of the supposed rescue devices that have been employed by evolutionists to try and save the day for common descent. Since we know that observed mutation rates, overall DNA diversity has demolished the ape to man evolution story. But Matt, my brother, I think we've been forced into early retirement. I'll tell you why, okay? Haven't you considered background selection?
Oh man, well, I guess we're finished. Now, of course we have. Background selection is something that doesn't even apply to these mutation rate studies that we're always bringing up. That's why we bring them up. We bring up the good studies because this is what we don't want to give our audience arguments to use that are going to be used by critics to say, well, you know, this is refuted by this and this is countered by that. Instead, we like directing them specifically to studies where things like selection, background selection, purifying selection, they don't have any factor whatsoever. And the reason why is because we're going to the neutral regions where there is like no protein coding even going on. And that really matters because if there's no purifying selection, then there is no background selection. So I want you to think of it like the fingers on your hand. And one of the fingers gets a mutation. Well, purifying selection is going to come in to remove that, and background selection is going to be bound to that, like a Siamese twin, and they're going to remove the alleles around that area as well. Well, if there's no purifying selection, that means there's no background selection. Really, really simple. And so when we're bringing up these pedigree mutation rate studies that we like to, which point to mitochondrial Eve living just 6,000 years ago, we're showing you that the regions that they look to are the hypervariable regions inside the D loop. And the D loop itself is not only as close to neutral as you can get, with only a few base pairs that are undergoing purifying selection, but the hypervariable regions are completely neutral. They haven't found any protein coding regions in it that are highly preserved and saved. So how in the world can you invoke something like background selection when there's not even purifying selection occurring? It's beyond me. It just tells me that the critics are on step one. You know, they're arguing against a subject they don't either know something about, or they're in desperation mode and they're just kind of throwing out any answer that they can give. But guess what? Even slowing down the rate just a little bit, even if you wanted to give it a little bit, it's still not even going to get them remotely close to the evolutionary timelines that they need. Let's say that it's slowing down the rate by two times slower. Well, that's not going to do. But you don't have any mitochondrial Eve in the evolutionary storytelling going back 10,000, 14,000 years, 17,000, nothing. They all go back tens of thousands of years, and you can't even get close to that. So that's why they're in such desperation mode. Purifying selection can't save them. Background selection definitely is not going to save them.
Right.
That's it.
They need their Eve between 100 and 200,000 years. And so, you know, a little bit of purifying selection, slowing down the rate a little bit is not going to help them. We've got biblical time in terms of these mutation rates. Plus, they don't understand their own story, Matt, because as I like to point out, brother, the nearly neutral mutation rate, okay, whatever it is, it's fast. In the mitochondrial chromosome, you know, there's different numbers, 0.1 every other generation, 0.5 in some cases. Either way, it's always too fast, right, Matt? Same with the Y chromosome, roughly 1 to 3 per person per generation in the paternal line. Okay. Oh, but the long-term substitution rate, the fixation rate is so much slower. They don't get basic population genetics that the nearly neutral mutation rate, yes, nearly neutral, because those are also effectively neutral in the sense that selection can't see them. They build up over time. Evolutionists assume that the vast majority of the genome is junk. Matt, you and I were just talking about that earlier. That's been completely overturned. We can go over some of the arguments that militant evolutionists like to utilize, you know, to say that, well, all of the activity, the 80% activity discovered by ENCODE and subsequent research projects is noise and spurious. We can and we have demolished all those. Anyways, if the vast majority of the genome is functional, then the vast majority of these mutations are nearly neutral. The nearly neutral mutation rate approximates the fixation rate. Yes, we get it, evolutionists. Fixation is slow today, very slow. It's almost zero. Some random guy over in China or Australia gets a mutation, okay? The chances are very low that that mutation is going to spread to all people on the planet and become fixed, stuck in place, okay? But the evolutionists don't even understand their own model. And here's the thing, Andrew Cumming, we're going to demolish every comment that you have. Send it in. Okay. Andrew has not addressed any of this. Actually, you can find on my channel a discussion on fixation equilibrium with Andrew and I. And he dodge, duck, dip, dive, and dodge. Okay. 5 Ds of evolutionist dodgeball. So bring it on. I see one comment here, Matt, that we can get ready for you to decimate as I continue teaching evolutionist basic population genetics. Let's see here. Andrew, he made a D-loop comment, but the chat's flying quick. Hope I didn't lose it. Oh, here it is. Okay, Matt, so get ready for this one. Anyways, poor Andrew. And these evolutionists that believe they're related to banana plants and that non-living chemicals somehow organize themselves into the first self-replicating molecule. And then we get the evolution of the first single-celled organisms to multi-celled organisms to fish. And then you get a rebel fish, don't you, Matt? This fish, he wants nothing to do with the other fish swimming around in the ocean. So he's like, you know what? I'm gonna crawl on land. I'm leaving you guys. I'm bored of this ocean life. So he's, you know, he crawls on land, no legs, very difficult for him. He makes his way up a little bit, but then he dies. The next generation of fish, they try the same. They get a little bit further and further, and then eventually they evolve into, you know, land-dwelling tetrapod creatures, from fish to amphibians to mammals. And then you get some, you know, wolf-like, dog-like mammal. He's bored of the land life. He wants to go back to his roots. He wants to go back to his fish ancestry. But taxonomically, there's no going back to a fish, is there, Matt? He's going back into the ocean to become a whale. I mean, this is all evolutionary storytelling. These are the greatest hits of evolution, okay, which Andrew believes is science, but it's not. It's pseudoscience. So anyways, they believe in these wild ideas. They don't understand their own model because according to them, in their Out of Africa story, they have thousands of years, Matt, thousands of years where man exists in smaller populations, in tribes. They're isolated. They haven't spread out to all parts of the globe, right? So what that means is fixation is fast. So for the majority of evolutionary history, fixation is fast. Picture this is evolutionary history. Right here, just the very tip of this phone. That's the last roughly 4,500 years where fixation is slowed down. But the majority of their history, fixation is fast. Okay. So even with slower fixation rates today, and even with purifying selection, your nearly neutral mutation rate, which is fast, equals or approximates the overall fixation rate. And in the biblical model, we have that short period of time from the flood to Babel where people start off with 3 reproducing couples. You have a very small population, and then they grow, but they don't spread out to all parts of the globe until God confuses the languages at Babel. So now in the biblical model of origins, we have fast rates of fixation. So there's a counterbalance. Everything works out nicely in favor of the creation model, but against the evolutionary model. And it's because they don't understand their own evolutionary story. Because if they did, they'd understand that this argument is weak and doesn't work. That says, well, you need to focus on the long-term substitution rate, which is a lot slower than the observed empirical pedigree rate. No, that argument doesn't work. But anyways, so hopefully Andrew learned a thing or two there. So Andrew says to you, Matt, the D loop are linked to the coding regions of the mitochondrial genome that are under purifying selection. So if I can steelman his position, perhaps. Background selection. Okay, so if you have a lot of mutations that have accumulated all throughout the mitochondrial chromosome, including the D loop, then, Matt, if you have a large mutation where it prevents reproduction, right? Because selection is differential reproduction. Who's reproducing the most? And so you have a mutation that kills a person. They don't pass on their genes. All the other background mutations that have accumulated over time are also wiped out. All of these areas within the mitochondrial chromosome are connected. And so in a way, over time, that can help purify the mitochondrial genome and keep it the way it is, where there's low diversity. And I think there's speaking of background selection, I think there's a bit of background noise when I unmute you. So I'll finish this point, Matt, then I'm going to throw it to you and unmute you. So anyways, does Andrew's argument, and just to give you the entirety of it, he says it doesn't have to be lethal mutations. Any deleterious mutations in the coding region will lower the fixation of neutral variants. Well, no, again, there's a counterbalance even with purifying selection. But anyways, he's saying that all of this works together to slow down the overall substitution rate. Matt, what are your thoughts, brother?
Well, sorry about the background. I tried to go to a nice park, but there's a lot of
it got dark real quick.
Yeah, it did, and it makes sound travel more. So hopefully it's not too loud.
No, you're good.
Okay, yeah, it's like saying, okay, well, guess what? Telomeres are connected to other regions of chromosomes, and guess what? They have different mutation rates as well. Just because the control region is with the coding region doesn't mean anything. They're their own independent regions, and all of them have different clocks. And that's why we want to find the most accurate clock. And the best way to find an accurate clock is one where deleterious mutations aren't occurring. So that way purifying selection isn't occurring so that we can get the most accurate time. So when we look at a coding region, it's highly under purifying selection. And so therefore that would become the worst clock because you can't tell how often mutations are arising and how often selection is occurring. So therefore it's a bad clock. It's ticking randomly, not very good. Then the scientists, they notice the control region. They go, wow, look at that, the D loop. the coding, the control region seems to be even better. Oh, great. And I got a plane. um, these regions are even better. The D loop seems to have its own hotspots in it. And these hotspots are very good because the mutations that arise there aren't deleterious. So we have no mutation that's coming up that's going to stop, like you mentioned earlier, where reproduction. And so if those harmful mutations aren't rising, that means purifying selection isn't affecting the area. So they said the D loop seems to be a great area, probably one of the best. They said, but there's a couple base pairs, like I think maybe 121 in the entire 1,122 base pairs that is under purifying selection. So they said, okay, let's look inside of that and see if there's even better regions. And they found them: hypervariable region 1, 2, and 3. Now, these regions are very small, like 360 base pairs, 332 base pairs, and they only have hotspots of about 20 base pair regions. And those are flipping over fast, and they're completely neutral. So therefore, they make the absolute best clock. And that's what Agnar Helgeson found in 2024. He looked at every single region and compartment of the mitochondria and found that they all have different clocks, and some of them are better and more accurate than other. And the hypervariable regions are the absolute best clock. And that's why Parsons and his study found mitochondrial Eve living 6,500 years ago, looking at hypervariable region 1 and 2. And then the following year did the exact same. So then we go to all of these studies that have ever looked at these hypervariable regions, the best clock that we have, and they all get the same result, no matter how deep the pedigree goes. Like what you're looking at right now, that was done by Howell. And he did an 11 generation deep pedigree study to find out what is the maternal ancestor of all human beings, and 11 generations back. So nice and deep, like the critics say, well, Parsons was just a single generation. Okay, well, here's one that's very deep. And guess what? Same exact results as Parsons later.
Well, I got to stop you there. So when someone like Dan Stern Cardinal, he was on Examining Evolution's program, Rebecca, our sister, recently, repeating all the greatest evolutionist hits that we've demolished, right? So when he says, well, pedigree or these pedigree rates in here, let me just mute you real quick while I finish this, then we're going to throw it right back to you. So these pedigree rates, single generation pedigree with Parsons, we should just discard it. It's not good. But then you're saying these other pedigree studies that are deep rooted, is what you said, those actually complement and confirm what a study like Parsons has said. Is that right, brother?
Exactly. And we don't have to go back to the 90s for all of these either. In the study that you and I just published on your page, we go down the line, going all the way back to the very beginning. 1992, Luddstorm. He was the first one to run a mathematical equation based on this and said, wow, look at that. This seems unbelievable. The hypervariable regions are ticking extremely fast, and there's no selection, and the most recent common ancestor is very recent. And so then the real test came. What happens if we're going to actually do a deeper rooted pedigree and go back in time, generation after generation, see if selection is actually playing a factor into that? Hal found out no. The most recent common ancestor has very, very recently. So then Parsons came out later and said, all right, let's run it massively. Let's do a huge blood cell line or cell line and then blood samples. And then he did just that. And the blood cells were the best. They were the most accurate. Cell lines had a little bit of a problem, but nonetheless, it came out completely accurate again, lining up with earlier Howell. And then Parsons was under heavy scrutiny from his, because Howell wasn't, because he didn't publicize it like Parsons did. Parsons became worldwide. And so the critics came out of the woodworks for this, and they even joined him the following year and found out, no, the numbers are accurate. This is actually true. And then since that time, look at all those studies that use the hypervariable regions and the D loop. They know that's the best region. So they're not using the protein coding region, because that's not a very good clock. And the most of the mutations we find are in those regions. So therefore, why would there be more diversity in those regions? Because purifying selection is not removing them. Purifying selection is removing mutations in the protein coding region. So therefore, it's obvious that there is some diversity there, but that's why it's lower. We can explain everything in our timeline, in the biblical timeline. It doesn't line up to the evolutionary timeline. Like you were saying, that's one of the problems with that, is they they have areas where the population is bottlenecked down to a few things, right? A few people, and then it's population zero, like for a long period of time. That's an inbreeding problem. It's ironic that they say we have one single generation, but yet they have massive inbreeding problems over evolutionary history that lasts for thousands of years. And then so over the decades, multiple studies have kept coming out, and they all confirm the same thing. They all confirm Parsons and Howell and Holland, all of them. And they keep getting that. So it's not like, oh, well, only the single generations do that. Or, oh, it was technology was bad back then. They were counting mutations they shouldn't have. All these things have been accounted for over the years, and they keep confirming the exact same thing. And that's why you and I did a deep dive on it. And we said, let's go through every single study and explain how they got the results they did, why they did, answer every critic's argument. And it's a 37-page report. We called it a paper, but it's a report. And we went as deep as you possibly could on the subject, because we want our audience to have the best answers to things. And how and what are the critics going to say, and how do you answer that? Very simple.
Right. We don't want to just provide what we believe are the strongest pieces of evidence for young earth creation. We also want to equip those listening, our fellow brothers and sisters in the Lord. We want to equip them where they can present the argument, let's say with mutation rates in the mitochondrial DNA and the Y chromosome, and how we can trace those DNA compartments back to two original people just a few thousand years ago, consistent with exactly what the Bible describes in terms of human origins. We also want to equip fellow believers, or anybody who's interested and objective, with the best possible counters to the best possible objections or challenges. So that way you're not going up against an evolutionist who's informed, and then you're left without a response to their objections. No, we want you guys to have responses to their objections, which is why we seek to leave no stone unturned. But Matt, man, aren't you ignoring Andrew Cumming, his comment here? Aren't you ignoring the King et al. Study?
One study, maybe Stone King, or Stone King is one of the people that does a lot of pedigree studies. I guess they call him King sometimes, or it's an entirely different person. I cover every single study that's ever been done. So yeah, most likely it's in the paper. I didn't dodge any. I go directly to the ones that all of the critics bring up. And every time I find one of these weird, random, obscure papers like that, it's always like, that's not the study was never about substitution rates. They might have published a rate, but it wasn't what the study was about at all. And they almost always neglect something like, oh, we didn't count heteroplasmy at all. None. We only counted what we deemed were probably fixed substitutions in this one region, and we ignored that. You'll always find that. There's always a reason why the results don't agree with the vast majority of all the other ones. Every time. So just like randomly picking out one study, just read the study, and you'll see in the paper itself why they got a rate that's different than the others. Every time you'll see that there's filtering, or they're anchoring it to something else. Those two things are always consistent. By going by the raw data every single time, the results end up being exactly the same. So, and me and you like to model build, by the way. You and I love to model build. You notice that we don't build models that destroy our own arguments? I don't want to be mean, but we don't build a flood model that has a hole in it that creates a massive problem. Man, me and you should just create some better models for the flood geologists, I'm telling you. They create their own heat problem that we have to solve for them. What's going on here, guys? I mean,
that's a good, because we're talking about a lot of the stuff that we answered and engaged this year. Heat problem is a major one. We addressed it in a number of ways. And sneak preview, David Winsberg, a heat problem specialist, he published a couple papers for a creationist journal. And anyways, his 5.5 hour response to Gutsit Gibbon is ready to go. And so we'll be premiering that probably over the next couple weeks, maybe a few weeks, one a week, because we do have several to go over, and he's pretty detailed. So I don't think anybody has quite engaged or interacted with the heat problem as much as us. And Matt, I'll give some thoughts on this, but Andrew says he's referring to, and again, the chat's moving quick. I'm trying to coordinate chat questions and talk at the same time. Here we go. Andrew says the analysis with the lineage of Richard III. Matt, before you respond, we've discussed at great length all of these other papers. I've got a whole response to Dan Stern Cardinal here that goes over the Trista da Cunha study, the King et al. From 2014 that he's talking about. Dan appeals to King et al., arguing that variation across lineages means we can't trust the faster rate. Okay, there's other papers he could use like Sato et al. Of course, there's variation across lineages. My response, that's expected in population genetics. Some lineages will be faster, some slower, but the central range, okay, 0.05 to 0.1 substitutions per generation across the 16,500 base pair mitochondrial genome. Matt, as you said, and when I'm done here, maybe correct me if I'm wrong, the D loop, the non-coding region, the control region, that's what's accumulated the majority of the mutations. And earlier we were going through these studies, and you'll notice control region, control region, control region. I mean, these are accumulating mutations that for the most part selection can't deal with. And so they are going to build up for the most part unchecked over time. But again, there's a counterbalance based on what we know about both the biblical and evolutionary models where we have faster rates of fixation. Anyways, but the central range remains robust and widely replicated across multiple pedigree studies. That's what Matt just demonstrated. Both King et al. And Sato confirmed the well-known time dependency problem, then solving it. Okay. Now, we were a little more detailed here where, because some of these like settlement populations, okay, with these studies, we can agree when they were settled. I mean, they're within the biblical time frame. But if you're looking at tiny inbred isolated populations, they're going to flatten rates, right? Drift, bottlenecks, and limited lineages distort global averages. So we call this mutational distortion or demographic distortion. Okay, so yeah, you can have some apparent slowdowns in some of these studies if they're on islands or they're inbred. That's going to be a slower rate. Okay, look at the Canary Islands. We can agree settlement occurred within 4,500 years. That's not the problem. The problem is extrapolating those numbers across deep time assumptions. Okay, there's an anchor point baked into evolutionary timelines, even if they want to say that there's no assumptions built in. Trista da Cunha and Norfolk. Yes, settlement dates are known, but that doesn't eliminate demographic distortion. They want to take demographic distortion, Matt, and then use that to overturn what we're getting in all of these more sophisticated mutation rate studies. Small founder groups still flatten rates regardless. We're not going to take the exception to overturn the rule. And post-settlement genealogies can compress timelines further, skewing calculations. Global pedigree studies disagree. Broader pedigree data sets across many families, as you shown, Matt, consistently report higher rates. And so those studies, whether it's the King et al., the Canary Islands, Trista da Cunha, Norfolk, Sato et al., none of them do anything to overturn the more sophisticated studies that give us a good, balanced global rate. Matt, what are your thoughts overall of that study, but everything that I just said there about the demographic distortion, brother?
Yeah, I would have to say that I've noticed a common trend with a lot of these studies, and the ones where they go the slowest are the ones where they are focusing on the entire mtDNA, because that includes the coding region. And anytime you do that, you're going to have a problem, because the coding region itself will always have purifying selection working. So they're looking at regions that can try to slow the clock down, and then they're anchoring it onto a known time frame, and then saying and extrapolating that the mutation rate must be this because we know that the time. That's the opposite of what we need to be doing. That's why pedigrees are so good without any assumptions needed and without anchoring it anywhere. Anytime you anchor it, you've already thrown in an assumption, because now you have to align a rate up to that. And so when you're lining up a rate, think of it like this. How many fixed substitutions are there in the D loop? Remember, the D loop's very small, 1,122 base pairs, but yet there's 14 fixed substitutions in there. Now, how many is there in the entire mtDNA, including that? You would think a lot, right? Actually, no, there's only 21 to 22. That means that there's only like 7 or 8 more fixed substitutions in the protein coding region. So what does that tell you? That tells you that the area where there's no selection occurring has more mutations in it. Which should be obvious. They're not being erased over time. And the region where there's fewer mutations by a lot. But yet we can account for that in a very short period of time based on how fast we see them. So what they're doing is they're assuming that all of the mutations that accumulate in the entire mtDNA must be going through that purifying selection. So therefore the clock must be slower. But that's the fatal mistake that they've made, is that assumption, because we know that the D loop, where most of the mutations are not. So they've failed by not considering those other factors. And it's understandable. Those studies are very confusing. They're convoluted. They're highly technical. I didn't even know for a couple of years that the Parsons study was only look at the hypervariable regions, and that made all of the difference when comparing it to other studies that look at the entire mtDNA. So when you're seeing these papers, they don't make a distinction. They don't say that in the paper anywhere. You'll never find it. Like, oh, these rates are faster because of these compartments. And when you compare the overall rate, you're going to find a slower mutation because those regions undergo purifying selection. So therefore they don't make as good of a clock, which is why we ignore them. No, you have to learn that on your own. So that's why the experts use the D loop, because the experts know you shouldn't use a clock that doesn't tell good time. And that should be obvious. And so when critics look at some of these studies like that one, they're looking at the entire mtDNA the vast majority of the time as well. So like I said, they're either anchoring it to something, or they're looking at a region that incorporates the coding region. Horrible clock.
Yeah, and even if they anchor it to a known historical settlement, let's say, that we can agree with, they're still extrapolating that. So if they take, the settlement of an island population, let's say, and then that population is more isolated and inbred, so they're going to have, there's going to be an exception essentially to the overall global mutation rate because of demographic distortion, where we're looking at the rate of a population that we would expect to be slower. So this is a lineage. This would be an exception that we would expect to be lower. So even if we agree when this settlement took place, we agree with their anchor point. Okay. The problem is they commit an extrapolation fallacy, because then they want to extrapolate that backward to their evolutionary time frame. So even if they're not directly assuming human to chimp common ancestry, it's still baked in to the study, to their overall conclusions. And so they extrapolate it out, ignoring the global pedigrees or all the other more sophisticated pedigree studies that confirm what you've been saying, a faster rate. Okay. So their extrapolation is not justified scientifically. You made a good point about these papers. They're technical, they're detailed. You really got to dig into them. I've realized that over the years, of course, but you find the same, just studying endogenous retroviruses and other topics. But that's especially true in these studies dealing with paleoanthropology, dealing with the Australopithecines, for example, like Lucy, Littlefoot, other hominins like Habilis, Sediba, because there's a lot of in-house debate, even within the paleoanthropological community, a lot of different views and positions. So you have to read these papers very carefully and diligently. It's a full-time job just producing one article. So you got to be very careful. And Matt, speaking of so-called hominins, we believe in multiple working hypotheses. You'll find on this channel oftentimes several different models. We had a question earlier from someone in the chat. We appreciate the questions that asked about the HPT model versus the CPT model. Well, the way we do things is we love peer review. We love looking at various models. We like giving the best of all models for the audience to digest, analyze, examine, and come to their own conclusions. So this year, for example, we hosted many very comprehensive seminars that have never really been seen before in the world of young earth creation anywhere. We had a 4-hour seminar on CPT. We had a 4-hour seminar on HPT, always having experts. The CPT seminar was Dr. John Baumgartner, and these were rigorous. They didn't comprise softball questions. No, I mean, we were bringing up challenges, objections. We really wanted to leave no stone unturned. We did the same thing with HPT, and that way the viewers have a couple different seminars going over the two most prominent flood models, and then they can examine those, study them, and, you know, come to their own conclusions. Anyways, we do the same thing here with the Neanderthal challenge, Matt. So here's my question for you. Neanderthal genetics. I published a couple studies and videos this year going over what I believe can answer Neanderthal genetics, why they have so many more DNA differences and mutations, why they nest differently phylogenetically to humans. Evolutionists argue that means Neanderthals cannot be descendants of Adam and Eve in the last 6,000 years, 4,500 years since the flood. And I go over the radiation rocks theory and the post-flood environmental conditions associated with Neanderthals and how that would greatly speed up mutation rates. We have several studies that go over empirically in observed time. We have real families that are passing on 7 times the amount of mutations to their offspring due to radiation, due to chemotherapy. Environment can do the same thing. And so all you would need is faster rates of fixation of these deleterious alleles and faster rate of mutation accumulation before Neanderthals reach their end stage, which is very highly inbred, low genetic diversity. Anyways, that's it in a nutshell. But then you came up and published a model that's actually different from what I propose. So this is multiple working hypotheses. Why this is effective is because, hey, here's a technical challenge presented by the evolutionists. Here's several different ways you can look at it and address it. And that's fantastic. So Matt, my question to you is, and perhaps this will be the first time in video format that you're going to iterate this argument. How do you believe, or what do you believe is the best way to answer this challenge that, well, Neanderthal genetics and Denisovan genetics are just too different to modern Homo sapiens to have been able to be descended from Adam and Eve, brother?
Well, that's a good one. Perfect timing too. Just got somewhere else where it's more quiet, I hope. So
I figured I'd give you that opportunity to drive safely while I reiterated all these points as comprehensively as possible.
Can you hear me yet?
Yes. Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay. Sorry, you were linked to my vehicle.
Okay.
So
I was just saying, yeah. So if you can hear me now, the Neanderthal question, your most recent method of dealing with Neanderthal genetics, which militant critics still love to bring up. I've had several formal debates on that topic over the years. Dr. Dan Stern Cardinal recently brought it up in his discussion with Rebecca. And so, Matt, what is the best way, in your opinion, to address that?
All right. Well, without having to invoke that there was any change in mutation, how can we answer the fact that Neanderthals have double the amount of mutations in them, and that Denisovan even have or triple the amount that we have today? That's the question, right? So when we look inside of the mitochondrial today, we find that there's about 123 nucleotide differences in all of humans, the maximum diversity, and in Neanderthal maybe 220, and then Denisovan 385, somewhere around there. And so how would we answer the fact that, wait a minute, they only lived for about maybe 1,000 years, and then they accumulated that amount of mutations over just 1,000 years, but it took us from the flood, 5,000 or 4,500 years to accumulate 123. How can we make sense of that if the mutation rate is the same? So, well, when you go to the genetic boundary studies, we see something very interesting. Anytime there's a branch off from a subspecies, let's say you take a wolf and then you make a dog breed from it, like a husky, there's a huge burst and a gap, a genetic gap of mutations that arise in the new subspecies instantly. Where do they come from? We don't know. That's what genetic boundaries are in that study. They're like, wait a minute, where did those mutations come from? They just arise out of nowhere. When the bonobo came from the chimpanzee, there's like a massive difference of like 23 base pairs. Like, where did those come from? That's in the CO1 gene, which is a much smaller 650 base pair compartment. So if we see that and we compare that to the entire mtDNA, I said to myself, okay, if we see which we would agree, the bonobo came from the chimpanzee and they exploded with 23 nucleotide differences in the CO1 gene, and we extrapolate that to the entire mtDNA, what would happen if we did the same thing with humans? And then we say, well, Neanderthal was a subspecies, and then from Neanderthal came Denisovan, and they were a subspecies. And each time they exploded, how big would that gap be? Well, guess what? I added that to the very mutation rate study together and put them. I put it as its own study, and I think I left it in the mutation rate study as well. And guess what? The gap is exactly the same. Exactly. So without any change in mutation rate at all, we have a gap creating Neanderthal that just arises out of nowhere. As soon as they branched off and became a subspecies, boom, there's a gap of all those differences that just arose out of nowhere. Incredible. So we don't actually have to invoke that there was rapid mutational change, even though that's a possibility. Even though, remember, we look over at the Amish people, they're mutating 7 times slower than the average population. So if we have populations changing slower, then obviously what are the odds that some would change faster? Of course there could be. So like you said, our goal is to answer and give multiple working hypotheses that can answer this hard question easily. And I think we can do that.
So you're saying we have a couple different approaches or means to address the Neanderthal genetics challenge. One that works, that involves the possibility of hypermutation and hyperfixation in these post-flood people groups, and one that you just explained, and I screen shared one of your articles on it, where hypermutation doesn't have to be invoked.
Right. Exactly. Some people don't like that. They said, no. If you're going to say that this mutation rate explains when Eve lives, then you can't just try to say that the mutation rate changes over time. And I'm under the impression that, well, the substitution rate is what we're looking for population-wide. Single individual mutation rates down certain lineages will be different. And you and I can agree to that, right? Certain lineages might have a fast mutation rate and then they come to an end. Others might be a little bit slower. But the overall substitution rate is what we're trying to get at, because that tells you when Eve lived. So if we're going to say that that's consistent and that's always the same, then we would have to say that rate that we see is consistent, and we can use that consistently. And then the critic will just say, well, you'll have to change that rate if you believe in Neanderthals and Denisovan. It's like, well, wait a minute. They lived in very small populations their entire existence. Secular science will say that they believe that they lived in a population size of between 15 to 20 every time that they found pockets of where they lived and how they lived. That's very small. You know how fast a fixed substitution would become in a population like that? Pretty quick. So, I think our model best explains them, especially when we realize, wait a minute, how long can a population of that size even exist? And right. When they said that there's an upper limit of around 2,000 years for a population size of 25, that's extremely short. How could they have lived for 400,000 years, people? There's no possible way. So there has to be an explanation. What that explanation is still up in the air. And since you and I are the only ones that seem to care about giving that answer, we want to have as many ideas to explain it as there is, because we know they didn't live for 400,000 years. Now, the fossil record might say that, but what are you going to trust? The rocks and the fossils that never agree with any of these observed rates? I mean, come on. It seems pretty obvious. You want to trust what we're seeing and repeating and observing in the biological world rather than what the rocks are dating. So
it's a great point. Great points all around. Don't you find it interesting, Matt, that when you're looking at these papers and researching the hominin fossil record story, especially on Neanderthals and Denisovans, Aractus, Heidelbergensis, isn't it interesting the numbers that they give for the amount of individuals that existed in these people groups? They're always a very small amount. They exist in small tribes. Nothing of what you would expect if the deep time evolutionary story was true. But what we argue about post-flood people groups, post-Babel dispersal, possibly a couple individuals within a family migrating away from the main group even before the Tower of Babel dispersal. And so for that time, they could hypothetically be, going with the hypermutation model, they could hypothetically be hypermutating. And then as they get isolated, they remain in a position, because Andrew Cumming is saying, is he still confusing inbreeding with faster mutation rates? No, not at all. You could be hypermutating for a time. And then once you reach this position, let's say with Neanderthals, where now they're isolated, inbred, they're not growing, they're not spreading out really, then that tribe will then become inbred, right? So then they'll experience a loss of genetic diversity, even though perhaps at first they were accumulating a lot of mutations and more diversity. But with inbreeding, okay, the effects of inbreeding and these deleterious alleles, they could come to the forefront and lead to rapid genetic fixation. But anyways, Matt, so my original question, isn't it interesting that the population numbers that we see in the evolutionary literature actually lines up better with how we argue in the post-flood model in explaining these hominins?
Yeah, it does. It's ironic that they have to have a net zero population growth for like Homo erectus over like how they lived for 2 million years. And it's just, that's insane to think that there was a net zero population growth. Could you imagine what that would do to the fixed substitution differences? Could you imagine the mutation burden? I mean, the experts always say that the low diversity is confusing, and they admit it, that it is confusing. Only the people on the internet seem to think that it's no big deal, but you can't have a human population for millions of years. And you mentioned something interesting. You said, you know, there's hypermutation and then there is inbreeding and death. We found that exact same thing with the mammoth on Wrangler Island. It says that they died from hypermutation and inbreeding. Interesting. So we find an exact scenario of a Neanderthal group as an example in animals on the Wrangler Islands. Check that out sometime. They have massive amounts of mutations, and then they died from inbreeding. Now, they were stranded, of course, but guess what? Neanderthal and an ice age were also very stranded as well in a lot of cases, because I think their last stand was somewhere north, so they were migrating kind of west, and then once they hit Spain, they went north, and that pretty much finished them off after that point. It was the last of them. So they chose a horrible migration pattern by going north. And that was pretty much what gave them the death blow during an ice age. And our ice age lasted about 1,500 years. And that's probably about how long Neanderthal lived, right around that same time frame. And then there was the ice age melt off. And that would have been another catastrophic flood, which probably caused the Sahara Desert to form, because it swept over North Africa and bringing sand and sediments that created the desert. And our model answers that extremely well too, because the amount of the rate of desertification of the Sahara Desert also lands on the biblical timeline. So our model answers a lot of these things very, very well.
And so in light of that and what we've been discussing, Andrew Cumming, I mean, in a nutshell, he's asking, why are they still more genetically diverse than Homo sapiens then outside the sapiens clade?
Because of that genetic boundary gap that occurred as soon as they formed. So in the study that I was looking at, like, why in the world would a chimpanzee or a bonobo be genetically different than a chimpanzee vastly all of a sudden within one generation? why would that even occur? Like what's going on? Because if we were just going to say, well, if I inherit 2 mutations from my mother that she didn't have, and then my kids will have 2 more mutations that I didn't have, and then their generation will have 2 more. Okay, that's pretty consistent. But all of a sudden, if there's a branch off and there's another child and they're born with 50, you're like, wait, where'd that come from? I thought this mutation rate was pretty linear. I thought it was pretty consistent. How in the world is there just a huge branch gap jump between a new subspecies? What's going on? Or a new when they cross animals like a lion and a tiger and they get a liger, you would think like, okay, well, the lion and the tiger are mutating at this rate, so will the liger. Well, it will mutate at that same rate, but when it forms, for some reason, there's just this large gap that exists between the species, and they don't know where it comes from or how it gets there. So that's where all those mutations came from. They arose out of nowhere, and no one can explain why or how. That's the fascinating thing about genetic boundaries. They don't know.
And all of these things considered, Neanderthals and Denisovans and Heidelbergensis, since they're experiencing different mutational events, different genetic histories, different environmental conditions, their history after the flood is so much different than other people groups in the human line, that as they spread out, especially if they spread out earlier and they experience these differences in history and environment affecting genetics, so on and so forth, then they're going to grow more and more distinct over time to us as modern Homo sapiens, because still the challenge is put forth, like Andrew Cumming, that is saying, but you just said they went through a lot of inbreeding in the latter half. How are they still genetically diverse then? Aren't they genetically diverse from humans for all the reasons that all of these reasons combined, all these factors combined are making them more and more distinct and unique, giving them a different set of biodiversity than modern humans today, which experience a totally different population history, genetic history, environmental history. Matt, what are your thoughts?
Any branch that's going to occur early on in a species is going to make that lineage more diverse from the other sister species right out the gate. So let's say that a wolf goes through a bottleneck, which is what we say, and evolution actually says now as well. So then it comes through, and right out the gate, there is a speciation event, and it creates a coyote, and let's just say, what would be another species, a wild dog kind? We'll just say a domesticated kind, like a husky. So we have a husky and a fox right after a bottleneck. After 5,000 years, the husky and that coyote are going to be way more different than something that the husky speciated, or they bred from a husky more recently. Right? Does that make sense? Because you're going farther back in time, much more divergence from those species. And since we would say that punctuated equilibrium and rapid radiation occurred right after the flood, because there was a world that was empty with massive amounts of environments just waiting to be filled with different niches for the animals, these adaptations were happening quick. And animals were locking down and adapting to those regions, and others kept migrating and adapting to those regions. So we have speciation events occurring rapidly after the flood. Then, once the world becomes full, it slows down because there's no need for species to rapidly adapt to all these new environments. So now when you see something coming up, it's going to have a lot less diversity than its sister species, obviously, because it's just a rose. So that's how you can tell what is more distantly related, because there'll be more mutational differences between the two families. So I hope that makes sense.
Well, it makes a lot of sense. And I was trying to find my article on the topic, because I put out an article somewhat recently on all things created heterozygosity. And if you take advantage of the Patreon page, you can find there's a lot of posts here. So for example, here's the new Genesis revealed. But if you move through recent posts, you'll eventually come to an article on created heterozygosity where I do discuss, as Matt, you and I have discussed many times, the fact that more heterozygosity. So after the flood, you have these rapid shifts in environment. You have highly heterozygous organisms when compared to today. More heterozygosity means more potential for speciation and variation. That would also mean more PRDM9 sites for faster rates of recombination. So you're going to get more scrambling and therefore more of these blocks of DNA in the genome, because evolutionists will say, oh, there's just not enough time in the young earth creation time frame to explain the amount of scrambling that would have to take place. Well, yes, there is. And we've provided sources showing that more heterozygosity means more PRDM9 sites, more recombination, more effective recombination. But anyways, faster rates of speciation. So these massive and dramatic shifts in environment right after the flood, you're going to be expecting faster rates of speciation for, let's say, 1,000 years. We have very quickly, you have shifts from more heterozygosity, from less heterozygosity, so heterozygosity to homozygosity, where eventually species hit walls, right, Matt? Because a lot of evolutionists, they'll say, well, what are the limits to change then? Because we say, yeah, evolution means changes in allele frequencies and populations over time, or change over time. We don't disagree with that. That's what we see. But what we see genetically are horizontal changes, shifts from more allelic diversity to lesser states of allelic diversity. That's why you could see two wolves. Okay, say a population of wolves. Over time, you get all your domestic dogs. How much allelic variability or levels of heterozygosity and therefore potential for change are you going to have in a couple chihuahuas versus a couple wolves? You're going to have a lot less. So we're hitting walls. So Matt, therefore, what kind of predictions can we make as a young earth creationist when evolutionists say, well, there's just too much species and varieties on the planet today to explain in 4,500 years. But in light of everything we're saying, the created heterozygosity hypothesis, faster rates of recombination, speciation rates for that 1,000 years after the flood, is there really a problem when critics such as Dr. Joel Duff points to these different felid species that we have in ancient civilizations like Egypt? And he'll say, oh, so all within 1,000 years, 500 to 1,000 years after the flood, you get these modern phenotypes, let's say in felids or canids. We can't explain that because that would be hyper-evolution, he says. But that's not really the case, is it, Matt?
No, I mean, look at what we can do with domestication. We can see the genetic variation maximum we can get from that, especially even in cats. Right? And cats are what he's talking about. He says, well, when we look in the Egyptian walls, we can see large cats and we can see small cats. And then a little bit later, we can see domestic cats. Those are all things that have to happen in a rapid succession. And we're saying, well, okay, like, but the variation from what? Like, what are we getting at here? What from, you think from the first one comes from the assumption. What is it? That there must have been maybe just one cat species on the ark. I actually wanted to know if that was true. How would we determine if that's true? Well, I actually determined that what you would probably do is take all of the small cats and go back to a consensus sequence. Then take all of the large cats and do the same. If they share the same consensus sequence, they're all the same kind, and they went through a bottleneck together. They did not share that. They were separated by either 12 or 24 fixed substitutions. I think 12. And so that means that they did not go through a bottleneck as a single unit. They were separate. So there was large cats and small cats that were on the ark and went through a bottleneck together. They got off. So we don't have to say that a single cat, like a Proalirus or any weird creature, branched off and made all large cats and all small cats within just a few hundred years of time. No, there was already a small cat and already a large one. So that already limits the amount of different cats that you're going to get from them. And there are only like 8 large big cat kinds, and well, today because of domestication, lots of house cats. But originally there were only a couple wild cats that the Egyptians grabbed to make domestic cats from. And guess what? In that mutation rate study that we did, we actually tested a mummified remains of a cat, to determine when the maternal ancestor for that cat lived using haplotypes, and it lived 2,000 years prior to that. So if this cat was mummified in the year 365 BC, you go back 2,000 years, you get the ancestor to that cat, which lands again in the perfect time frame of the Egyptians when they domesticated the cat, and in the biblical timeline using the mutation rates. So again, it all lines up so well with our model and how we explain everything with the diversity of life on Earth, and it doesn't come anywhere close to the evolutionary timeline yet again. So actually his argument was used to help confirm our explanation for how we can explain the diversity of life. It was quick, and we can see how quick it is today. We can see it in hybridization events that happen really quick. And hybrids are massive. There's so many more hybrids than evolution ever expected there to be, because you got to remember, evolution, some of these species have been separated for hundreds of thousands of years. Well, guess what? They're not going to breed with each other if that was the case. But yet you could take any big cat and they'll breed and make offspring. You take any small cat and breed them, they'll make offspring. That's not evolution, people. That's biblical timeline history. They would not be able to do that in tens of thousands of years. That doesn't work. Same thing with humans. You can't lock humans in Australia for 55,000 years ago and expect that the normal human population is going to be able to breed with them, because speciation events happen very rapidly in the animal kingdom. They would have been their own clade at this point. They would have been their own populations that would have never been able to be part of the human population again if animals are any indicative scenario like that. But yet we see it. Darwin's finches ended up being a massive surprise for the evolutionary community, because Darwin's finches were able to hybridize and create a new species in 3.3 years. In just 2 generations, they can create a hybrid species. Evolution predicted it would take thousands of years before one new species could arise. But yet, nope, hybrids they occur all the time. So that just speeds things up even faster for us.
Well, like you said, it's the same problem with humans. We're expected to believe, based on their evolutionary philosophy, because that's what we get a lot of, Matt, is evolutionary philosophy. We're supposed to believe that Neanderthals are separated from humans, modern humans. Neanderthals are human, but there's some distinctiveness. We had a question earlier, what are Neanderthals? From Rosina. Well, I appreciate the question. Neanderthals are humans made in the image of God. They're adapted to the cold eco-glacial environment. We understand environment can oftentimes dictate morphology. There's a lot of morphological adaptation built into humans and each created kind. And so what's interesting about the speciation argument that we're talking about, Matt, is we're not looking at any true anatomical change, true anatomical novelty. We're looking at morphological adaptation, morphological variation, novel morphological phenotypes, but no new anatomies. So all of this can take place rapidly when you have heterozygous animals coming off of the ark. And that's why we see a good degree of variation in humans, which they call the hominin fossil record, between Heidelbergensis, Erectus, Neanderthals, Denisovans. Denisovans, we've got DNA, mostly from a few bones. So those morphological differences go right back to the robustness of pre-flood and early post-flood humans. But we're supposed to believe that. So according to the evolutionary model, Matt, you have humans. Erectus basically leaves first, evolves independently into Heidelbergensis and Neanderthal, so on and so forth. Humans eventually leave Africa and meet up with Neanderthals. Oh, what a surprise, right? We got other humans outside of Africa, and yet we have Neanderthal genes. So to further answer the question, Neanderthals are us, but just adapted to a cold eco-glacial ecosystem. One major reason, we have their genetics. What does that mean? Well, if we have Neanderthal genes, that means we interbred with them. That means we had fertile offspring to be able to pass on those genes. So if we're actually separated from Neanderthals, Matt, like you said, for tens of thousands to hundreds of thousands of years, there's no way that we should have been compatible to the point where we can produce fertile offspring. That's a major challenge to the evolutionist model. Matt, Rosina has a super chat question. This is a good question. I appreciate the support. And Rosina is wondering, did two wolves ever give birth to an F1 dog? If not, how many generations did it take? So to reiterate the way I understand it, how many generations do you think, Matt, from the flood, your dog archetype, wolf-like creatures, we understand then you get speciation to get non-domesticated dogs like coyotes, wolves as we know them today, dingoes, so on and so forth. But then you'd also have humans through artificial selection are able to take those pre-existing genes and domesticate dogs. And then we got about 400 dogs quite quickly. So how do you think that process looks, Matt, from a dog-like archetype off of the ark to the various canid species, but then humans intervening and creating or helping to form these domestic dogs, brother?
I would have to say it depends on their migratory and their built-in heterozygosity. So meaning cats are predators. So they're going to be tracking and hunting animals like a goat, which are known migratory animals. So a goat will migrate somewhere and a cat will follow it. And we can see that cats aren't very diverse. You can see a cat and you can see the bones of a cat and you can't tell what species it is from one another. Their only difference is really their size. Dogs are very different though. They have a lot of built-in heterozygosity. So when they would migrate, when wolves would migrate and branch off and create other, we could just call canines, their phenotypic diversity would change and adapt to a region in a very different way. The snout might change, the muzzle, the form that it would take. If it was cold, it would change. It would get thicker. So they're very different. They must have had a much more created heterozygosity archetype that was on the boat. So that would mean that their adaptations would have taken place pretty rapidly, especially the more they migrated around. And because they're very territorial, foxes and wolves, you can see it from above, and you look even in Yosemite, the different wolf packs will never cross each over other packs' territorial lines. You'll see when you take a dog on a walk, it'll urinate on trees. It's creating a general area where the others aren't supposed to pass. So what they would do is they're not as migratory, but they're very much more adaptable to regions. So I would imagine that it would take more generations.
Matt, and before you continue, brother, take as much time as you need because it's a big topic. I got to run upstairs just for 1 minute. So take your time on this one, bro.
All right, will do. So what's going to happen is it's going to take a little bit more time probably for the canines to migrate, possibly because they seem to like burrowing down a lot more than a predator animal that would trace and track a migratory animal like goats, for example. So it doesn't mean that they don't adapt just as fast. If they had more heterozygosity, they could adapt very, very quickly. And if the species that if their migratory patterns spread out and some went north and some went south, then that would mean that they would be adapting even quicker because the diversity would be required because of their migratory patterns. Now, if they all went to the same region, because remember, a lot of animals went south and their instincts were good. They took them into Africa and Australia. Those were the two regions mostly that they could ever get to. So everything that went south thrived and did good. Everything that went north, the woolly mammoth, the woolly rhinoceros, the saber-toothed cat, all of these things are dead. They did not thrive because when the Ice Age ended, they ended. That's why. It's not because they died being there. No, it's because the Ice Age was what they adapted to. And when it ended, there wasn't enough adaptation time to survive the end of that Ice Age because it was just too rapid and their adaptation kind of cornered them. And, obviously, if a mammoth dies, there goes the food supply for all of the cats. And if the cats die, then it's just a food chain thing, right? So we're trying to we explain that's our goal. Explaining the phenotypic, that would more be environmental conditions. So we want to be able to explain like how come we in humans we went from a robust looking Homo erectus and Neanderthal look into the modern day one. Well, the same thing with domesticated animals. We're like a domesticated dog compared to our ancestors. So when you see a wolf, what do you think when you see that? skull. Do you think that's primitive? Of course not. So why do we think that an ancient human skull is primitive? We should not think that way. It's more robust. It's better, especially more adapted to living outside. We don't much live outside anymore. So those adaptations have gone, and it seems as though only a few, groups of people on Earth retain some of those physical features because of the conditions that they live in. And those are robust features. You live outside, you're going to retain some of those a lot more than people that sit at a desk job and moved indoors and started living inside homes all the time and started eating foods that are weak and inferior. And then our mouths started to shrink, and then our wisdom tooth started to leave because their teeth can't even fit in our mouth anymore. How is that beneficial? Our wisdom teeth store and harbor stem cells. They're very important for later in life. So just not having them anymore isn't a good thing, but it's definitely good if your teeth aren't fitting in your mouth anymore and they're getting crushed in there. And we know that happened after, really happened when sugar was introduced, but also when food started to become so hybridized and messed up in the way we were processing and cooking them, and the grains that we were eating all year round when they were normally just like a seasonal food to help you survive through winter. Now we're eating them year round. It's just not optimal. It's just not a good diet to be eating all the time. And our adaptations to it have led to less health over time. And so those robust features in our ancestors are a good thing. And I'm sorry I can't see chat, so I don't know if there's more questions rolling in. I'm just walking around like looking at Standing For Truth logo. So I'm sorry, but I will.
No, that's good. We wanted a detailed, comprehensive, informative answer. So in a nutshell, then, summary form for Rosina's super chat. Did two wolves ever give birth to an F1 dog? Well, just like the evolutionists would say, because Matt, as we like to point out, and we do so in our presentations to set the foundation, if by evolution you mean change over time, or basic adaptation, or changes in allele frequencies and populations over time, or generations, allele being a genetic variant, we're not going to disagree, because what the debate is what type of change are we seeing? Are we seeing true anatomical novel change? Are we seeing vertical changes? Or are we seeing adaptation, or simply shifts in heterozygosity to homozygosity leading to new species? So this goes back to Rosina's question. Individuals don't necessarily evolve. It's populations evolve. Okay, populations, a small population or a larger population. So to say that, well, two wolves just boom in one generation give birth to some kind of domestic dog, well, no, it is going to be over many generations within the population, but still rapid morphological change when compared to the deep time evolutionary story, right, Matt? Because the evolutionists need lots of time to explain speciations, because they believe all DNA differences are the result of mutations over time, where we believe that the vast majority of DNA differences are the result of design diversity or created heterozygosity. I like to explain it like this. Think of basic alleles. You got capital A, lowercase a, capital B, lowercase b. You'd be genetically heterozygous in that case. There's DNA diversity. If you're capital A, capital A, capital B, you're genetically homozygous, no DNA diversity. Created heterozygosity suggests that in Adam and Eve and the created kinds, you have millions of positions where you would be genetically heterozygous. Capital A, lowercase a, capital B, lowercase b. It's the evolutionists that assume all of these alleles and differences are due to mutations. So no, these variations can come about quickly, but we're not just saying, boom, two wolves and then out pops, some domestic dog. Like, obviously it's going to take a little bit of time and change, but not as much time as the evolutionist position would propose. Does that make sense, Matt? And in a summary, how would you essentially address what Rosina's questioning here?
Yeah, I would also like to throw in and remind everybody that we're looking at, the evolutionists admit our model without realizing it by saying everything we see is descent with modification. Descending. What are they descending from? They're descending from a common ancestor. Every time there's a bottleneck, you lose genetic diversity, and genetic bottlenecks reduce it every single time. So just think, you got a wolf, right? very heterozygous, very good animal to have on the ark. But if there's another bottleneck and the only thing that survives it are chihuahuas, you have a disaster for the next generation, for the next animal that's coming out. So bottleneck after bottleneck after bottleneck, you keep getting descent, descent. How much evolution are you actually getting? We don't see any of these things where the new anatomical features are arising out of nowhere. So what are you going to get? You're only going to get what the creationists say you're going to get.
It's a great point. Andrew Cumming, he's proven my point for me. Alleles like capital A and lowercase a refer to the entire loci or genetic location. So a specific location where you're heterozygous, but then apply this to millions of, there's not just 2 locations in the genome. You could apply this to millions of locations. Matt, you and I, we're heterozygous at, if I remember correctly, roughly 3 to 4 million spots. In terms of common alleles globally, there's roughly, if I remember correctly, 10-ish million. Okay, so you can have 10 in Noah's family. That was a bottleneck, single generation bottleneck, followed up by rapid and exponential growth. So not as much heterozygosity would have been lost as many critics assert. But anyways, many would have been lost. Even for sake of argument, let's just say half were lost, right, Matt? Okay, Adam would have had 20. So Adam has 20 million variants. Noah and his family have 10 million. They spread out after Babel. So you have 10 million common variants on the globe. We have 3 to 4 million within us. I mean, it's all easily explained in the biblical creation model. But anyways, so he says not individual nucleotide positions. Intraexonic recombination is extremely rare. That's not a problem. As if you've been paying attention, like the debates we have, right? The critics like to take a nap, Matt. You'd have faster rates of recombination and gene conversion. So gene conversion can break up those alleles, and then recombination breaks up alleles as well through genetic level scrambling. And you'd have more PRDM9 sites, these recombination hotspots, and then the PRDM9 genes in the pre-flood world, but immediately post-flood, because when you have more heterozygosity, you're going to have more of those PRDM9 genes. You're going to have faster rates of recombination, faster rates of gene conversion. And so intraexonic recombination wouldn't be a problem either. I wanted to address this question, Matt, and then we'll throw it back to you. Rosina, what's the definition of new anatomies? Does the fact only modern humans have chins count as new anatomy? No, because the lower jaw of a lot of these hominins, and Matt, maybe you can explain how these changes came about, a lot of them after the flood. A lot of it was due to diet as well, environment dictating morphology, so morphological change. But a receding chin in a lot of these hominins that were robustly built. But then us as modern humans, we possess that distinct bony projection in the lower jaw, right? Okay, so that's not new anatomy. You have a reduced chin or a receding chin versus us that got that bony prominence. So there wouldn't be any new anatomy there. That could come about and that could be considered morphological variation. Anyways, Matt, any thoughts on any of those points, brother?
Yeah. Think about it like brow ridges. Did we say we've lost the brow ridges? No, some people still have them. It's reduced. It's a reduction. So yeah, when we change our diet, we notice massive amounts of differences. And what happened is when we started cooking food, that food that was now hard became very soft. And what happens with soft food? Well, guess what? Your jaws get weaker. Your muscles get weaker. Chins start to get, and now it's like our jaws and chins are like wishbones. They can bend. You can't look at our ancestors' jawbone. You talk about strong. Oh my gosh. They were like this one over here, a like tiger nuts raw. Those things are hard to chew. Hard. Try them sometime. They're like, man, buy some tiger nuts and eat those, man. They're rough to eat. I don't know. You can imagine your diet. You would have strong jaws after something like that. So imagine a diet consisting of that. Man, you'd be like a sumo wrestler eating. They're so yeah, these aren't new. What's new about that? There's nothing new. It's not like a new anatomical feature has to be something that didn't exist prior. You don't see those examples. You just see existing things being more prominent. are not, are less prominent. That's all you're seeing. I mean,
Right.
they say that a sponge evolved into all life on Earth. Well, where are those transitional species of that sponge where with these new anatomical features slowly arising? They're not there. They have to be. We still have sponges. Come on.
Well, right. Well, their story from single cell to multi-celled ancestor to fish, amphibian, reptile, mammal, eventually primate, like a primate, or early primitive primate, as they call it, then a human. From fish to a human, or a sponge to a human, sponge to a whale, bacteria-like organism to a chimpanzee, those require true anatomical changes. Matt, do bacteria or bacteria-like organisms have brains and circulatory systems and a heart and two legs and two arms, and hair? All these things that would require true increases in phenotypic complexity. But as you've been describing, take the felids, take Ursidae, take bears off of the ark. You have a bear archetype, a dog archetype, a cat archetype. From there, from pre-existing DNA differences, you get everything from, take the bear kind, everything from a gorilla, or not a gorilla, a grizzly bear, a polar bear, a brown bear. With dogs, you get everything from a wolf to your domestic dog, to a dingo, to a coyote, so on and so forth. Show me the anatomical change in there. Even if it's happening rapidly within 500 to 1,000 years, that's all morphological variation. That's it. But evolution requires true anatomical novelty, the evolution of brains and hearts and arms and legs. That is the kind of evolution, the type of large-scale evolution that we don't see. Then they want to bring up arguments like, well, what about nylon digestion by bacteria? Or what about novel lizard placentas, apparently?
Milk.
Or
Yeah. What about
Lenskis? Right. Well, and
milk?
then if you want to give a quick response, that you have some great information on how epigenetics can address a lot of these. But we just did an evolution dismantling 3-hour seminar with Dr. Andrew J. Fabich, where he studied more than anyone I know Lenski's E. coli bacteria, and he just absolutely demolished those arguments. So no, what we see is morphological variation or adaptability, but we don't see true anatomical change. Isn't that right, Matt?
Exactly. That's the thing that people need to be reminded, because we see, they teach us in the textbooks and they show the pictures, and all of the pictures are just imagination. And that what they tell us versus what we actually see and observe are totally different things. When, they tell us, well, what happened is bacteria absorbed and then went through symbiosis, and then they created these life forms which became eukaryotic. You're like, whoa, hold on, show me symbiosis real quick. Oh, we can't do that. That happened in the past. How? Oh, so that happened, but it can't happen again. Correct. So the whole clade that just arose out of nowhere, just take your word for it that it just happened this way with no examples at all. Correct. Just have faith in it. We told you it happened. So there's eukaryotes, so therefore it happened. Right? That's the magic of evolution. Just believe.
Just believe it because we said so. Matt, I'd like to see you address, or what your thoughts are on. So Sydney Raptor earlier said this: we always appreciate our comments from our favorite critics. Deep-rooted pedigree. We were talking about this earlier, right? And still, haven't you noticed that the evolutionists, even the most militant evolutionists, they're really struggling on mutation rates? And that's why we say that there's no better time to be a young Earth creationist, Matt, because we're proving that by showing why all of the best counter objections, criticisms from the other side on topics like mutation rates, Neanderthals, the global flood. I mean, we had so many. We just did another seminar with Dr. Tim Clary, who just blew my mind with the amount of knowledge he had. He did an excellent job debunking counter objections. And so we're proving that it's a great time to be a biblical creationist, because the critics are really failing. All year, I've very aggressively been putting forth the Y chromosome dissimilarity challenge. Nobody has yet to provide a sophisticated mathematical population genetics-based model explaining those differences. But anyways, Sydney Raptor is saying deep-rooted pedigree, ? Something like phylogenetic studies, Matt, a more accurate and relevant mutation rate, So he's being a little rhetorical, and I'm curious, how would you respond, brother?
Oh yeah, yeah. Use evolutionary assumptions to give you evolutionary assumption answers. Sounds great to me. Typical, really. Oh yeah. If you got to incorporate evolution in deep time, those phylogenetic mutation rates. So basically, the word is interchangeable. Deep-rooted pedigrees are phylogenetic. Oh, okay. So no, we're not playing that game. All we do is we go. You can go back as deep rooted as you possibly can in any pedigree with any animal species or any human, and go back. The deepest human one we have probably goes back to 1410. The pedigree in is it Hayer or Holland? One of those two goes back to 1410. The pedigree mutation rate is exactly the same as Parsons. Oh, whoop-de-doo, surprise, surprise. And then guess what? You go to animals, the exact same thing. You mean to tell me that all animals went through a bottleneck in the biblical timeline? Yeah, and after? Come on. Not one animal, not an alligator, not anything ever survived an evolutionary bottleneck, or even went back to one. Is that what you want me to believe? Come on. It's just so ridiculous to infer. Just trust the deep time. Ignore what you see in all of these studies. Who cares about those? Who cares that they land perfectly on the biblical timeline like you guys predicted? You need to take evolution into serious consideration when considering evolution. Why? It's not even serious to me. It can't even make predictions right. It can't even explain the diversity of life if it can't explain mutations. Mutations rates explain the diversity of life, and it's gotten everyone wrong. So why would you trust it? The phylogenetic rate is a complete joke, and even the experts admit there's no way you could slow down the pedigree mutation rates to the phylogenetic rate at all in any study. They admit this. Get the experts on. They all say the same thing. It's only the internet atheists that's like, you're forgetting this. No, I'm not. I pointed out, and that's what critics hate. It's the ball's in their court, and they can't answer it at all. Their best have tried, and what do they got? Well, what about background selection? It's not even occurring. What are you talking about?
It's like they're not even trying anymore, eh, Matt?
Yeah, they've given up.
They're still
I can understand
at
why.
first base. Yeah, they're at first base, and we're rounding third base on the way home. And we've now entered 2026, and we just hit home. And these guys, again, are still hanging out at first base. No answer to the Y chromosome dissimilarity challenge. No answer to our responses to their objections and criticisms on mutation rates. No answers to the answering of flood objections in all of our many seminars this year. Dr. Tim Clary, Dr. Andrew Snelling, Dr. John Baumgartner, all well-respected, prominent geologists and geophysicists, really putting the evolutionists on the defense. What about this, Matt? Sydney Raptor says, is Matt cognizant of the fact that D loop is displacement loop? In other words, a change in the particular sequences. Do you understand that, Matt?
It has no bearing on the mutation rate at all. So it's like, it means absolutely nothing. You don't think the experts took that into consideration when they did their pedigree analysis? You don't think the experts were like, oh man, maybe we should take that into a factor? Come on, stop wasting everyone's time.
Well, and look at Sydney Raptor still repeating this. Can you see that on your phone, Matt?
Hold on. I wasn't looking at anything. Pedigree mutation rates do not take into account selection. It's not accurate for long-term genetic studies or mutation rate. So he just didn't listen to the beginning of this at all. We just went over all of it. We look at particular compartments, like the hypervariable regions, which Parsons did, and they said, oh, look, natural selection isn't occurring there. Purifying selection isn't removing anything because all of the mutations that occur there in the hotspots are neutral. So therefore, there are no deleterious mutations arising there. So therefore, they make the perfect clock. We've already been over this. Like you said, step one, man.
First base. Dr. Rob Carter made a good point here. He said pedigrees are already post-selection. Dr. Rob Carter explains strongly deleterious mutations never enter pedigree data sets because they die with the carrier before reproduction. Thus, pedigree rates already reflect heritable, transmissible mutations. Selection doesn't slow fixation throughput. Neutral theory shows fixation rate equals mutation rate and equilibrium. We already spent 20 minutes going over their story as to why there's an equilibrium and a counterbalance. Selection may shape which mutations survive, but the overall traffic flow, that's what throughput is, still matches the incoming rate. It's like if you have a street and you have a bunch of different cars entering that street and they're going at a certain speed, and fixation is the end of the street. Okay, you're going to have many cars that maybe run out of gas, their car dies, their car breaks down, they get in a car accident. But because you have so many cars entering that street, you're still always going to have, okay, cars reaching the end of the road, which is akin to fixation. So you have a lot of mutations entering the population, and fixation is slow, but over time you have a counterbalance or an equilibrium point where that nearly neutral mutation rate is equaling the fixation rate, because you're still having, even though 99% of mutations are lost, there's always one that's reaching fixation. Again, it's slow today, but for the majority of evolutionary history, it's been fast. So there's a counterbalance. Oh, non-synonymous versus synonymous proportions, right, Matt? Do not undermine creation. They simply show that harmful mutations are filtered. We're not disagreeing with that. Something no creationists did not. And then it's not going to greatly affect the mutation rate. Like you said, Matt, when it comes to the D loop, these are mutations that those researchers are focusing on, because those are not filtered out. Invoking background selection is not going to save the day or significantly slow down the mutation rate. But this does not reduce the global throughput of fixation over generations. Purifying selection is real, but it's already baked into the pedigree signal. Critics keep using it, like Sydney, as a hand-waving excuse to explain away the data rather than engaging the actual equilibrium principle. Then you got Dan. What about the Canary Islands? What about Tristan da Cunha? What about Norfolk? What about King et al? What about this? What about that? He doesn't get the fact that demographic distortions the exception isn't overturning the rule. And Matt, correct me if I'm wrong, you've already established the rule, haven't you, brother?
Absolutely. And if these critics have actually solved the answer paradox between the phylogenetic and pedigree states, where's their work? They haven't solved anything. They're throwing excuses at you and me, hoping that we might not have an answer. And that's it. That's the best they've got. We've already answered these things. We've already tried to explain it multiple ways. I don't know how many more ways we can say it. We've done it in writing. We've done it in video form. We've done it in edited movie form. We've done it in every form that there is. I don't know what else to say. We've done it in debate form. They don't want to debate the topic. Every opening I've ever given has gone completely ignored. So I don't really know what else to say. The studies keep coming out with the same results time and time again, decade after decade. The internet atheist has not answered these results, and they're not going to. They're just going to complain like they always do. The problem is for them. We don't have a problem. The dating lines up perfectly with what we would expect. And it doesn't just do that with humans. It does that with all life ever tested in every pedigree study ever done. So Matt, that's it. It's game over for them as far as I'm concerned.
We love because as you know, we've done several debates here. Here's where I'll move. We'll start to kind of wind down. We'll move into this section of our year in review. So if you go to the website, I've spent a lot of time with our website designer. The website it's so comprehensive, guys. Really utilize this. We put a lot of time, effort, money into this. So thank God for you guys being the life and blood of this channel. We have a lot of active research projects. We're constantly updating our websites, including our main website. We've got our truth and research division here in the article section that we've been going through here. So we're putting a lot of time and work into this and investment. So you guys being the life and blood of this channel, we appreciate all the support, which is also why we've been doing these two members only and patron only series, the one with Dr. Dino and then Unlocking Genesis, which I've been doing, because you guys supporting us even with $1 a month to be a patron really does help us fulfill our mission and goals for this year. We're a team. And so Matt, I'm going to move towards this question that I have for you. And to the audience, take advantage of the website. You got several of the new articles here. We've also uploaded several of our latest seminars, this one, Unmasking Deep Time. You're not going to find a more thorough dismantling by a PhD geologist than this. 3 hours, Dr. Snelling even demolishes arguments like isochron dating. Matt, you and I have given several presentations. We've done debates over the years. Just at the top of my head, we've presented twice for Creation Today. We presented for TCCSA. It was a privilege to present on the Real Science radio program. We were on Campfire Apologetics. We did several debates. I was on the Andy G podcast. So it's been a lot of fun this year, brother. We've been busy. So this brings me to my question. We love when evolutionists that we debate. Okay, so we did several major formal debates this year. And in the video section, to the audience, go to the video section, got a ton of new categories. Click formal debates on modern day debate. People like to watch these debates, see how the evolutionists respond. So here's 2 of the ones that we did. We did a debate seminar on our main channel, and we simulcasted with Conspiracy or Culture Cats. So that's in the debate section, though. Anyways, we love when those we debate repeat arguments from these militant critics who dodge, duck, dip, dive, and dodge, like Dr. Dodgeball, Dan Stern, Cardinal, right, Matt? Because we've answered all of their criticisms. They pretend like we haven't. They repeat their rescue devices. They repeat their greatest hits. And we're just sitting there waiting in these debates for our interlocutors to repeat those arguments and rescue devices because we're ready to demolish them. We're not scared of them. We're hoping that they bring them up. So, Matt, a couple questions then. Is that not true that we hope that they're actually going to do their homework and bring up the best possible objections to what we have to say? Because we love debunking those objections in real time. Secondly, what were your overall thoughts on, let's stick with these 2 debates that we did on modern day debate, Planet Peterson, PhD Tony, Flying Spaghetti Auditor, and Austin Sims. Did you notice all the smack talking that Austin Sims did? I sent you those pictures, screenshots of Austin Sims, calling us names, ad homs, talking a big game. And we were just like, you know what? They just show their true nature when they talk like that, right? And the evidence is the debate itself. He was silenced. He hasn't been talking a big game at all ever since then. So 2 questions. Are we anticipating that they've studied critics like Dr. Dan Stern Cardinal and therefore use those arguments for us to debunk in real time? And secondly, what are your overall thoughts on these debates? Do you think we've been forced into early retirement because of them, Matt?
Well, for the first one, I sometimes wish that they did use the best critic arguments because that's what I'm prepared for. It's kind of like when you are training to fight somebody and they've never trained a day in their life and you're like, what are they doing? It's like they're more scary than a person that's actually trained because they're going to hurt me doing something wild. And so the people that actually know the subject really good, I'm expecting that the typical subjects to be brought up. And when they run to the Dan Sterns, they repeat the same thing. Like Dan didn't even know the difference between the different regions of the mitochondria that were under selection and what were not. So when they come in and they say, well, what about selection? I go, oh my gosh, they're like, yeah, like again, step 1, base 1. They don't even know the subject. So I was hoping that they were going to use Dan. That's why we didn't publish our papers until after our debates, because why give all of the answers away already? I was expecting them to use them. They did not. But, it doesn't matter if they do. We have answers to everything because we've debated these people multiple times. We've heard every argument ad nauseum. And 2, yeah, the critics talk such a big game that I think one of them said, I'm going to try my hardest to not call these guys retards during our debate. I'm like, oh, interesting. And then when they get there, after a couple back and forth, they're not very mean anymore, are they? They were like, uh-oh, I guess I stepped into the deep water.
Apparently, I was the mean one, according to the evolutionists in that one, right? And I'm just holding
exactly.
the fire.
You were the mean
I'm not
guy.
calling them names. I'm not swearing. I'm just holding their feet to the fire. If you can't handle the heat, stay out of the kitchen. But the way a lot of these guys act, like Austin Sims prior to the debate, calling us names, I'm going to try hard not to say XYZ. And we're just sitting there like, okay, we'll see if they can back up those ad hominem attacks and their tough guy approach. We'll see if they can back that up in the debate itself. Anyways, I just wanted to add that, brother. Continue.
Yeah. I remember when that debate ended, I said, I am shocked you guys were not more aggressive. I am shocked. And they both started laughing, which was ironic because they were so serious. And they knew deep down, you're there like, that's true. You know, actually, Austin Sims, I think he said, I wasn't mean. No, I wasn't mean. But, and then we've got Dan, he's doing so much damage control over on his channel. He's actually saying that we won these debates. He's actually telling people it's not a good year for evolutionists. We're on the side of real science and we're losing.
Yeah. Same thing on Facebook. I could name many evolutionists, one prominent one that we've debated for years and years, admitting that these evolutionists have done a poor, when your own side, including the militant ones, are admitting that you lost the debate. And look at Planet Peterson. He hasn't talked a big game ever since. You know, he goes into the debate octagon with a couple of informed creationists and he gets absolutely decimated. And we don't even have to say that for ourselves. We're just going by what all the creationists, but even their own side, are admitting. Planet Peterson had to call a friend, phone a friend. We put out a hilarious video on that because he couldn't address even the basics of our arguments. PhD Tony's been familiar with our arguments for years. I duked it out with him in a Q&A after show in a debate I did with Conspiracy Cats going back like 3 or 4 years ago. Are you telling me that you're still using the I'm not a geneticist excuse? Don't agree to the debate, PhD. And that's the thing about PhDs. Okay, they spent all this time, get a PhD, coming out believing that they're related to a strawberry. So right off the bat, I'm not very impressed. But secondly, you could have a PhD in, like, you know, I'm an expert in ants. I'm an expert in tiles. I'm an expert in this hyper specific topic. And then you bring those PhDs outside of that very narrow understanding of life, and they're just completely lost. They just get absolutely destroyed. And so, as evidenced by PhD Tony's performance there, flying spaghetti auditor Austin Sims talking a big game, bringing in ERVs, cytochrome C hierarchies. We addressed all of those points. We had several challenges for them, and they didn't even come close to addressing those. Matt,
I've never had anybody.
In many ways, were you kind of disappointed with what seemed to be a lack of overall preparation from the evolutionists?
I don't think I've ever had anybody say to us, or at any time, even on open mic, I would have never debated you if I knew that was the subject. We let you pick the subject. What are you talking about? Anyway, it's absolutely crazy that we use the same arguments a lot. And when we debate, we use them. Did they not even watch our introductions? Like, that's just so lazy. I think that they're coming into this going, this is just going to be a cakewalk. They're probably like the average person they debate on Reddit. I don't know. And then they come in completely unprepared. But it's shocking because they know who we are, but yet they choose to not engage in any of the things we bring up. Our entire openings, unless you directly ask them to answer, they avoid it. So that just tells me right there, they're not even confident with their own theory and model.
Right.
You know?
Right. It shows me they really don't have answers to the various challenges, because if they did, they'd come with one. I mean, I cross-examined both evolutionists in the second MDD debate for the first 20 minutes of the discussion. Explain the palindromic sequences, explain the ampliconic, the heterochromatin, the size differences. And for the most part, it's just silence or running from having to answer the challenge. Look at Planet Peterson. I put out an article following the debate on the Y chromosome dissimilarity preclusionary challenge. And that's why militant atheists like Planet Peterson, these guys are not actually interested in model building and showing why they believe or they hold to the superior model in origins. They just want to go in and argue. They're implacable. You're not going to see any sophisticated engagement from someone like Planet Peterson. So for that reason, we are thankful for evolutionists like Gutsick Gibbon, credit where credit is due. She'll put in the work. She'll put out response videos that we can interact with. And I'm excited. 2026, we're going to be hosting It'll be simulcasted to Erica's channel. She'll be debating Dr. Peter Line coming up soon on the hominin fossil record. So that'll be a lot of fun, since I think Dr. Peter Line is essentially one of the best, if not the best, on our side on dealing with hominins. And then Erica is clearly the best, has the most understanding on the evolution side of the hominin fossil record. So that'll be a lot of fun. I'm excited for that one. Now, I did want to bring this to the audience's attention. Take advantage of our category section on the videos. Matt, notice all the years we've really had the honor of interviewing and hosting so many awesome scientists and guests and experts. So you can go through this list, click the name, and you'll find several, if we've hosted them that many times, of the videos we've done with them. I've added several: Dr. Andrew Snelling, Dr. Andrew Fabich, Dr. Michael Egnor, a good variety of content for everybody as well, ranging from near-death experiences and the evidence for the soul with Dr. Michael Egnor, to answering critics. Carl Kirby and I debunked Simon Dan. But the refuting the critic side, Matt, how many other people have an entire section that you can go to? Because we know, Matt, how important it is to model build, to defend our position, to defend our arguments, to address the most militant critics out there. What are they saying? What are they putting forth? We want to address it, engage it, and demolish it. So all in one spot, you can go to the refuting the critic section. And we've put out so many videos addressing every critic. Matt, you cracked me up, brother, because what more can we do for the critics? We put out a response, name the topic, in video form, edited video form, book form, article form, live stream form. We debate them. What more can we do for them? But it's just the fact that many of them are implacable. They're not willing to change their mind. They're willingly ignorant. So a lot of this is for those on the fence. But as you can see here, Matt, Simon Dan, Dodgeball Dan Stern Cardinal, theistic evolutionists like Inspiring Philosophy, John Perry. These guys are looking for easy wins. They won't take us on. For example, someone like John Perry, he puts out this lengthy video on ERVs. I do an entire series debunking his arguments. Has he ever countered those? Nope. Which means the evolutionist side, Matt, they're doing a poor job at equipping their followers. The apostles of the evolutionary sci-fi religion are doing a very bad job at equipping their followers with rebuttals to our best arguments.
Right. As a matter of fact, the critics can even thank us, especially you, for getting the Young Earth Creation Ministries that always had comments turned off, like CMI and AIG, to actually opening them up, because they didn't want to deal with criticisms or anything. They don't spend time in the comment section. So they said, there's just too many critics to deal with. So they just turned them off. And then we turned them on and then had open mics. So we completely took that niche of like, let's like not even just ignore them or dodge them. Let's invite them on and figure out what are the best arguments. What do you have to say about this? And we'll bring something up, right? And now look, all of the ministries have open comment sections now. They did not have that when we started. And we were like nothing when we started. Like 5-6 years ago, we were like the lowest of low. Now we're like one of the top ministries because of all of these niches that we filled that Young Earth Creationists just weren't doing. And kind of nice, really. And now we've taken it into the real world. I've actually gone over to the local high schools to talk with teachers that teach evolution. And it's ironic. It's, online, you meet a lot of resistance when people argue against evolution. But in the real world, the teachers are like fascinated that there's another model that can better explain the diversity of life, and they want to learn it. It's like all the resistance is literally just from a handful of people online, a bunch of atheists, right? That's it. And they got, where are they? I don't see them anywhere. I go out all the time. Where are they? I don't know. They're probably inside on the computer, just typing away. Too mad to leave the house. But pretty crazy to me that I don't encounter any of them at any school I've gone to. And I'm trying to get Young Earth Creation in like all of them now, and they're taking it. I'm shocked. I love it, and I'm gonna spread it everywhere through Riverside, and then Sam's gonna take over San Diego. So if critics hate us now,
we're expanding with our team. I've got Canada
Yep.
covered. You and Sam got a good portion of the States covered. And what you said is so true. You went to a couple Genesis apologetics conferences in person and had some good conversations as well in person in 2025. I find the same thing. When I'm talking to people in person, including those that are agnostic, there's been several interactions over the year that come to, over this year that come to mind in person, where people would talk to me. People know what I do. People have questions. People want to engage. And I would answer their questions. I would present a lot of this evidence, and you could just see the light bulb click on. And they're just like, okay, that makes a lot of sense. And a lot of them in person don't even realize what their side teaches about evolution. I'll tell them what they currently believe to be true is the fact that they're related to strawberries, they're related to banana plants, and their face every time, because we deal with the most militant of critics, Matt, like you said online. But in person, most people are actually quite open-minded, and they realize, wow, yeah, that is what evolution teaches. And then you go over the problems, or you present them evidence for Adam and Eve, and very easy to persuade them, Matt. So it's a good point you make. So,
yeah, even teachers.
Right. So it's not a good idea to take the lack of open-mindedness and objectivity from the most militant critics that we deal with and extrapolate that to everybody. No, most people in your daily walk are actually going to listen to what you have to say and be open-minded on it.
Exactly. And that's kind of where we come in, because we want to get people equipped to deal with the most militant, because then everybody else is easy. Everybody else is going to be like, wow, I was expecting resistance. Instead, they were like, wow, tell me more.
Right.
Some don't care at all, though. Some have zero interest, which is all right. That's fine. Just odd to believe something that you don't know anything about, but it's all good. Each their own.
Well, you brought up a good point about the engaging critics over the years. Matt, you and I, we jumped right into the deep end. When I first got into this, you and I both, we just jumped right in and started debating your most informed critics, really. The very first time I even started a YouTube channel, I jumped into Skylar Fiction. Back in the day, he was an aggressive atheist, into his open mic. These were the Google Hangout days, and it was me versus like 10 evolutionists. One of my first formal debates on Modern Day Debate 5 to 6 years ago, RJ Downard on Modern Day Debate. I mean, he's been doing this for 50 plus years, right? So we're jumping into the deep end, and that's a good thing, because we get to see right off the bat. In 5 to 6 years, we basically get a PhD in what the critics are saying. So we jump right into the deep end, and we see what they're saying, what their best arguments are, what their best challenges are, and we get to work full time at addressing those. Then we host more open mics really on evolution than anybody. And you brought that up, the open mic challenge. So for those that are new to this channel and you love debates, well, you literally have endless content in terms of open mic debate based on the two years in a row. We had a massive open mic debate challenge series, and we hosted an episode roughly every 10 days. And you can find this playlist here. We weren't playing around, as you can see here, 2 years ago, because we kicked it off in about 2023. Anyways, open mic challenge. As you can see, 4.5 hours. Dr. Dino was with us for many of them. 4 hours. Look at this one. 5 hours open mic challenge. And you'd be there. It was either you, me, and Sam and Kent, or me and Sam, or me and you. Anyways, there were always us creationists present. This one, 5 hours and 15 minutes. This one's almost 6 hours, 3 hours, 5.5 hours. Look at this one. We had a 7-hour night. So anyways, these are just a few of them from 2023. You can also go look at the 2024 open mic challenge series. This one, 6.5 hours. Guys, we were not playing around. I can't believe we had that kind of endurance, Matt. So point is, anyone new to this channel and you love the open mic debates, go check out the playlist section. Go to 2023, 2024 open mic debate challenge series, and you'll find dozens and dozens and dozens of hours worth of open mic debate. Our good friend, credit where credit is due. Andrew Cumming was present for almost all of those. So we do, I think within those years worth of open mic debates, Matt, we essentially engaged just about every willing evolutionist. I say willing because to some degree, I respect anybody who's willing to engage in debate, because debate takes guts. It takes skill. It does take bravery in many ways. And there's so many, as you know, Matt, there's so many militant, popular evolutionists that'll never step into the debate ring. Not with us, that's for sure. Apologia, what a waste of time. He doesn't defend anything he says. Vice Rhino, Professor Dave, you'd be lucky really to get a formal debate with these days. Aaron Ra. So have you noticed all the evolutionists, they're kind of putting their trust in a handful of evolutionists, aren't they? They're really hoping that people like Gutsick Gibbon or creation myths are going to do the work for them, encounter the best responses from informed creationists.
Exactly. And where do they get their attacks for Young Earth creation? Ironically, from Young Earth Creationist. Where did Erica find the mud problem? Oh, that's right. Answers in Genesis. Where did she find her heat problem? Oh, that's right. Answers in Genesis. All of the problems that she brings up are already from Answers in Genesis. These aren't novel things that she just thought up on her own. They're already taken from other posts. Where does Dan get his arguments from? He gets them from Evograd, a blog post. He gets them from Peaceful Science blogs. He gets them from other places. None of these are his own novel ideas. So we've already heard these things so many times. We know where the arguments come from. So when they bring them up, we're like, I've heard that off this website years ago. It's nothing new. But man,
well,
we've done a lot. Mike.
Yeah, keep talking for a second because I'm trying to find your mud problem article since you brought it up.
Okay. Yeah, there's so many things that we've done over the years. Some of the hardest stuff is the edited videos. When I started, it was right before COVID, and I was learning to edit. And this is right out the gate. Then when COVID hit, that's when I got really good. And that's when I started making more of the videos. And that's what helped our channel kind of the most. With the videos that went viral on both of our channels that made them explode were both edited videos. So I think they did really, really good. And that's kind of like, I guess, what people more gravitated to. And then did the Quest series more recently, the Quest for Adam and Eve, the Quest for Noah, the Quest for the Age of the Earth. And those were like my more experienced, the last videos that I did. And man, editing is so much work. So I hope you guys enjoy those videos because those were hundreds of hours put into
people don't realize. I mean, they just think about you know what? I just noticed, I don't think we officially published the mud problem article because I didn't find it.
Oh no, I didn't send it.
Well, we gotta, let's look that over and get it up there. But as people can see, as we're scrolling through the article section on the website, I mean, it's hard to believe just in the last half of 2025 how many articles we published, leaving no stone unturned on challenges that really you can't find responses in the creationist literature on. That's been a major goal of ours in 2025.
We should let the people know we didn't write those all in the last couple of months. We've been writing those for so long.
Right, all year. And we finally got to the point where we could start to publish
them all at once.
So even though we would start to upload, 5 a day, that's just because after months and months of looking them over, reviewing them, peer reviewing them, we finally got to the point where, okay, now we can implement our truth and research project. Hopefully, we're hoping into 2026, because right now our truth and research division is right here in the article section. But one of our goals is to hopefully get the funds through those willing to support if it's on your heart. We want to get a whole nother website, truthandresearch.com. And we got some big ideas for that. But anyways, mud problem. We'll be adding that here. We've got a blog section for people as well. So, again, as we wrap up here, it's been a big year of answering challenges, model building, dismantling evolution. Matt, you've put out so many classic videos. That's what I was going to say. The Quest series. How much time and work went into, and I'm going to find it here, Quest series. Please, anybody who has not seen this series, Check it out ASAP. You will not be disappointed. This is actually just a snapshot of it because there's a few more shorter ones. These are the longer ones, the movie style ones.
Yeah,
Quest for Noah.
Great
Quest
one.
for Eve. Quest for the Age of the Earth. And I think for Quest for Noah, between both uploads, it's looking at somewhere between 30 and 40,000 views. So praise the Lord on there. It'd be nice. We have the video. I think I have it uploaded in the resources section. Let's see. The video that went viral a couple years ago. Right here. Oh, amazing film on Noah's flood. You still get dozens of comments a day on that. What's that at? 1.6 million views or something?
Yeah, it's way up there. And I remember that video got taken down in the middle of it going viral. It was removed for some reason. And when I put it back, it's slowed it way down. So who knows where it would have gone if it wasn't kicked off of YouTube for a minute. But man, that was that was one of my earlier edited videos too. You never know what's going to take off. You have no idea. Just keep making stuff and keep putting it out, and it gets put on one person's playlist that has a lot of followers, and then bam, like look at Sam Shamoon. He has us on his channel, and boom, tons of new followers. They just love us over there, and his is a Catholic channel, so it's people that would have never seen this type of content.
Right, and we're looking forward to the third seminar on his channel, hopefully within the next month or so, because as you know, Matt, we have unlimited material that we can we can present, brother.
Oh man, he wanted to do one on humans and dinosaurs together. I think I had to like stop myself. I was like, there's just so much. My computer's just thousands of images.
Well, and people always make jokes that when you're presenting at the top of your screen, it looks like you've got, about 10,000 links opened up.
Yeah.
You've got a lot of front loaded information just ready to go on your computer during these talks.
Yeah, for sure. I the funniest comment I read for that was like, that guy's got boomer tabs. You know how that generation.
You mastered it though. I don't know how you're able to just go from one to the next, knowing exactly what's coming next, and it flows so good.
It's because I've made so many videos. I know where all my images are. I can just flow right to them.
Well, brother, this has been a ton of fun. We've gone over a couple hours. We touched on a lot of material. We took a lot of audience questions, engaged a lot of objections. I also recorded episode 4 of Genesis Revealed right before this, and I'll start to promote that. It is on Patreon. So for those that want to, for as little as $1 a month, you'll find on Patreon now roughly 250 posts, with many posts being exclusive to patrons. So do take advantage. All of those gifts and support that go into the ministry go right back into the ministry to put out content, host more debates, help with our behind the scenes active research projects. And so episode 4 is available. Demolishing dating methods. This one was a lot of fun. Dr. Dino presented his case, and I had many challenges and objections that I know exist from critics to present to him, and it was some really good interaction. And then we just did our 2025 year in review. Matt coming to us from good old California with the awesome California weather, hanging out with us in the park, which means maybe there's some spectators. Well, it looks like it's kind of late now. You're probably going to get kicked out of there soon from security. So Matt, let's wrap it up here, brother. Final words, final thoughts. 2025 was an excellent year, game-changing, record-breaking year. The case for Young Earth Creation has never been stronger. Matt, final words, final thoughts. Where do you want to take us in 2026, my man?
Oh man, you know what? We do a lot for the critics, and we will probably keep doing it even though they hate us. So I would say that in any new area they want us to focus our attention, let's do it, because we want to answer the questions that other Young Earth Creation ministries just don't do. And that's kind of what we're doing. Look at how many articles that are written now on subjects that don't exist anywhere else. So we're going to continue doing that. A lot of new articles coming out. I think I have like 5 more that I'm working on. They're just hard, and they take up all my time away from being able to edit videos. So we have to be selective of what we do. Luckily, most of our book writing's probably behind us, so that was a pain. Yeah, this next year is probably going to take us somewhere else. Every year we kind of flow into another open field, and we don't even know what that is until time is going on. So if the audience wants us to do something specific, we do it. That's kind of how we roll. And we're really diverse. We don't just do debates. We don't just do presentations. We don't just do open mics. We don't just do anything. We're very wide, very diverse. And I just hope that we can portray it in a good, balanced way, because we're more of what you would probably consider more of an advanced Young Earth Creation Ministries. And that might not be the most optimal thing for mainstream. The average person tuning in is like, wait, what are they talking about? So we want to keep it more like a mix of like Kent style at the same time,
a balanced approach. And with all the ideas that we have, I mean, you nailed it there in your closing words, brother. With all the ideas that we have, research projects, in-person conferences and events that we want to host, we would love to get another full-time Team SFT member like Matt. So that's why we're so thankful for the support we've received, but the more support that we can get from you guys who are the life and blood of this ministry, the closer we can get to adding to the ministry, expanding, getting another full-time worker and editor. I mean, people have seen over the years, I think we have close to 3,000 videos on the YouTube channel to enjoy. Those first few years, you were just pumping out in terms of the editing. We were pumping out highly edited, just really epic videos left and right. And so the more
we even did trailers. Remember, we did movie trailers for debates coming up.
Oh, those were epic. Those were like Hollywood Avengers, Batman versus Superman style trailers for the debates we were doing. You remember that?
I forgot about that, and just right now I remember it. That was so good.
One day coming up in the next few months, we need to do taking a trip down memory lane live stream where we go through those early but epic videos, going through those hilarious trailers. I mean, some of those videos I'll go back on. You remember that series we did? It was called Science Without the Fiction.
Oh yeah. Yep.
You edited those like crazy.
Man. Yeah. Like I say, guys, hours and hours every single day. Like, it was my job. Like, I didn't do anything but edit for like 5 years.
Right. So if we can get you back full time, we could take this to a whole nother level. So for those, if it's on your heart to help the ministry, help with our expansion, then praise the Lord, because we're going to go wherever God wants us to go. Matt mentioned some of the books we did this year. We do have other expanded books that we're working on for 2026, including a brand new book, the Human Evolution Handbook, that I've been working on for a while. You can get a glimpse of that, a teaser of that, in my Australopithecine, very highly detailed technical article. But this right here is the updated and expanded version of the Endogenous Retrovirus Handbook. And it's essentially a reflection of the year's worth of study and research that I've engaged in on the topic of ERVs. So, okay, brother Matt, I appreciate you hanging out with us for a couple hours here at your local park. Hopefully you've planted some seeds from people hanging out around you. They've heard some of the evidence for Adam, Eve, and special creation. So, okay, Matt, God bless you, brother. We'll chat after this. To the audience, thank you so much for tuning in. We hope you guys it doesn't feel like 2+ hours. So that flew by. We look forward to hanging out with you again. Tomorrow night, we're kicking off the year with a huge formal debate, 2 versus 2 showdown on the Olivet Discourse. So until then, Standing for Truth, Donny and Matt are signing off. Matt, there's his car. He's ready to go and have some dinner. So God bless you all. Standing for Truth is out.